Good morning, children. It's Charlie Craven with Charlie's Fly Box, and today I've got we're on a little bit of a streamer binge around the shop, so we've been tying some different stuff, and I thought I'd tie you one that we sell a ton of. This one's called a rusty trombone. Rusty trombone. It's a rusty trombone. You can look that up, and just be careful when you do that, or maybe just don't look it up. At any rate, the fly comes from Solitude Fly Company. That's Ray Chang out in Alhambra, California. And this fly is hugely popular on the North Platte. And it looks complicated. It looks busy. This fly really is just two buggers attached to each other with a little marabou wing. A few little different pieces thrown in there, and a few little tricks to tying it, but not many. Fairly simple. But this is a good fly. There's another fly called a Goldie that is the exact same fly tied in white or cream. It could be tied in cream also. That's for my friend Jennings Hester, who thought that they were white, and I thought that they were cream, and it turns out that a Goldie is white. But he's still wrong. At any rate, I'm going to tie you a rusty trombone today, and it is most definitely olive. So we're going to get started. I'm going to pull this one out of the vise. And I'm going to put a Tiemco 5262. This is a size 4. So I'm going to put this in the vise, and we're going to tie both the front and the back on the same hook. You could use a 4 on the front and a 6 on the back. I like to use 4s on both of them. So for thread, I'm going to use some Stephen Hankins Magpie Materials 110 Denier, 110 Denier thread. And this is that polyester thread that lays real flat. I love it for streamer stuff like this, or any bigger fly, down to about a 16 or so. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this thread just behind the eye, and I'm going to wrap all the way back to the bend here, and just dress the shank nice and evenly. You can see how smooth and flat that thread lies. That's one of the things I like the most about it. That polyester's got a little bit of stretch, but not too much. Just makes a nice even layer. And I realize we're off center on the screen, but this fly is going to grow over time, so just focus on one side. Maybe we'll crop that. I don't know. I don't know the capabilities of our technology. I handle the pointy end here. I have people to do that, and they're way, way better at it than I am. So for the tail, what I want to do is find a nice fluffy marabou feather. And you can see this one, particularly right here, is kind of matted down. That's not uncommon these days. If you take a dubbing brush and just brush through that feather, you can sort of fluff that back up again and make it more beautiful, which is what we want. Nobody wants to catch fish on ugly flies, and if you do, you just haven't caught enough fish yet. So I'm going to take that feather and I'm going to bunch that tip up. So I just took the whole feather there. I'm going to bunch the tip up into a little bundle. I'm going to measure it about a shank length long, like so. I'm going to lay this in at the bend. I'm going to bind it down a nice even band of thread just there at the bend. I'm going to lift these butt ends up, and I'll just spiral wrap the thread back up to, about an eye length behind the eye. And I'll lay that feather down and tie it down in that spot. And then I can trim the excess off. Now what that did is that built us some underbody on the hook, so that's going to build up our body a little bit without having to go to extraneous efforts. And then it'll just spiral back over that marabou, sort of locking everything down, like so. So now I'm going to take, and that's a nice thick marabou feather. If you've got a skinny marabou feather, you might need to use 2 there. That one's actually pretty nice and thick. I've got 2 reserved here, but that one's thick enough where I can get away with just the 1. So now I'm going to take 3 strands of copper Flashabou, and I just run them through my mouth so that they're kind of stuck together like so. Get you those where you can see them. And I'll bump this thread just in front of the hook point, and I'm going to tie that Flashabou in at the center of its length. I'm going to take half of it on the far side and just pull it to the far side of the hook as I wrap back over it, so that it's centered along the far side of the tail. And then this near side, I'm going to double it back and catch it with a few turns so it's in line along the near side of the tail. And then I'll trim that Flashabou just a touch longer than the tail. All right, so now we've got, what do we got? We're going to tie in a hackle feather, and I've got a few pre-selected here. Yeah, we're going to go with this one. So this is just a white dyed olive rooster saddle feather. Woolly bugger quality, not a dry fly feather. This is a soft webby feather. This is strung Chinese saddle. Nothing fancy there. But what I want to do is down at the base, I want to just strip a little bare section of that fluff. I like to leave the fluff on. That's kind of a good handle to hold onto the feather while I wrap it. But I want to leave some exposed stem there at the base of the feather so that when I go to tie off, I have a nice clean tie off. Then I'll separate the feather. I'll create a separation point. And I don't need a ton of length. This isn't going to be that heavy. I'm going to draw those fibers against the grain and create a nice clean separation point, like so. And I'm going to take that feather with the inside of the feather toward the hook. I'm going to wet that tail down just a bit. Inside of the feather toward the hook and catch it right here at the bend. And I want to anchor that down good and tight. And then I can clip that tip out of there. Now for the body is UV polar chenille, and this is copper olive UV. And this is size large. Now, size large is pretty big and buggy for this size fly. And you could leave it full, but it makes a really bulky fly. They do sell this in small and medium, but I just use the large, and I'll just trim it to length. If you've got large, you got it for flies that you need the large size stuff for, and then you can trim it, make it shorter also. It's really all the same stuff. So what I'm going to do is sort of expose this core on the end. And I'm just going to tie this in back here at the bend. We'll end up with a little tiny, almost negligible lump, but it's going to be buried under this bulky body, so we're not going to worry too much about that. So I'm going to tie that in at the bend and then bring my thread up to my index point. And you can see the fibers on this material are pretty long. You know, they're as long as the tail. So what I want to do to scale this to the fly, I try to get it all on one side. There we go, get it on the side that my scissors are on. So I'll sort of pull this out, and then I'm just going to come in with my scissors and cut it shorter. I'm going to cut it about half the length that it was, maybe even a bit shorter than that. You want to be careful when you get back here by your feather that you don't cut it out of there. You'll undoubtedly miss a few. It's not a big deal. The idea of this body is it's going to be sort of a ragged, flashy body. And the core of the material is what's actually olive, that core piece that we just tied to the hook. So that's going to create the olive body, but this is going to create sort of a flashy, raggedy body to the fly. So I've just trimmed that down. You can see how shiny that is. And I'm going to start to wrap this. Let's see, I missed one right there. You know, once you get going on this, you feel like if you missed one, you missed a bunch, but really not a big deal. I'm going to start to wrap this, and I like to just sort of fold it back like a soft hackle after each turn. You can sort of control the direction of the fiber on the strand. If you twist it a little bit as you go, you may need to roll it in your fingers to keep everything leaning back the direction you want. And I'm just going to put one turn in front of the other, building this up. And as you wrap, if you find that you miss some fibers, we'll have a chance, like that one right there is a little long, we'll have a chance to clean those up if need be. I really try not to sweat that too much because this fly is sort of raggedy by design. So I'll just keep folding back and just kind of think soft hackle. You're just folding those fibers back. This is just like you would do a collar on a prince nymph, honestly. And I'll tie that off just behind the hook eye. 2 or 3 good tight turns, and then clip that excess out. Now you can see it's pretty shaggy up here at the hook eye. I'm going to slide my fingers in there and just bind everything back. Give me a clean tie off. My hackle will ultimately be tied in there also, so I want to smooth that off a bit, but I don't have to sweat it too terribly much. And then I try to stand this stuff up, and I can see here that I've missed some. Now when I go in to trim this, I don't want to just trim straight across. I don't want them square. I'm going to kind of come in at an angle and make multiple cuts just to leave that ragged. Don't get carried away. He said as he got carried away. All right, something like that. So you can see raggy, shaggy, crazy body. So now I'm going to take my hackle feather, and I like to, anytime I plumber a hackle, I like to fold it. So I'm going to start here at the butt end of the feather and work my way down. And my fingers will appear on the screen here in just a second. I wet my fingers a bit, and I'm going to stroke those fibers up and down all to the back side of the quill. So again, just like I would do any sort of a soft hackle collar, I tend to do that on all my bugger stuff as well. Just makes her a better flowing fly. And then I'm going to spiral wrap this up over the body. And you're going to bind down some of those fibers as you go. Just part of the game. When I get to the front, I'm going to get just that last turn in there, and then I'm going to be on bare stem. And I can tie that feather off over the bare stem and end up with much less bulk than if I had all the feather fibers in there. Now, one thing I like to do here is, because we've got that bare stem, I'm going to fold that back and take several tight turns up over it just to really anchor that in place. Then I can cut that out. Build a smooth little thread head over the top of that. And then whip finish. Trim that thread out of there. Now, one thing, and I'm sure this makes no difference at all, but one thing that I usually do is I'll take my bodkin and I'll come in and kind of pull out those fibers that got bound down. This will get some of our shag back on the fly. That UV and copper strand that's in that polar chenille just has a lot of shine and flash to it, so we want to kind of pull some of that out, and it's just completely random and raggedy. You do want to be careful that you don't grab your hackle stem while you're in there, though. You could also use your dubbing brush to do the same kind of thing, like so. Now I see I've got one weird feather fiber here. Can't have that. So there, we tied a woolly bugger. Aren't we proud? That's the first half of the fly. We're going to put a little head cement on that thread head. And then while I've got this in the vise, I'm going to take a piece of spider wire and I'm going to fold this into a loop. And I have just habitually been cutting those pieces a little short. That piece would have worked, but I'd have had to fumble around with it. Nobody wants to watch me fumble around with things. I certainly don't like watching fly tyers fumble around with things, so I'm going to save us both the trouble. So I've just made that into a loop. And I'm going to push this up through the bottom of the hook eye. And then I'll pass the hook through the loop. And I don't typically do this all in my vise, but I want you to see what I'm doing here. Then I can pick that loop up with my scissor blades, sort of bring it forward. That way I can kind of miss any materials. And I want it to fold back over the hook eye, like so. So really we just formed a square knot with the hook eye. You can see the two strands through the bottom. And we'll set that aside for the moment. So just take that out and set it aside. Now I'm going to take another hook of the same size, 52/62 size 4, and I'm going to put a large size copper tungsten cone on it, like that. I'm going to start my thread just up behind that cone. And I'll dress this front hook the same way. I want a nice, smooth, even thread base. All the way back to the bend. And then I'll pick up my tail end, and I'm going to attach this to the front hook. Now, I'm following the original pattern here for as close as I can anyway, but there's no bead on this articulation. It's just a short little length of spider wire back there, so no bead there. The front hook does have a little tail on it, and the stiffer hackle does kind of keep the back hook from fouling. You could certainly put a bead in there if you felt that you had to. I don't feel that I have to. So I'm going to wrap forward over both of those strands, right up to the back of the cone. And then I'll fold that back again and come over it about halfway. And then I'll trim that extra out. And just make sure everything's anchored down good and tight there. You know, I've never had an articulation pull out I have had an articulation wear through when you're just catching a lot of fish, which, that's the idea. That's what you're shooting for. So I don't terribly sweat it, but I usually do put some super glue on there. The last thing I want is a fly I tied for somebody else to come apart, and then they can complain about it. So I'm going to put a little glue on there. And I'm using keyword of little. That was not a little. That was a fair bit of glue. Probably more than I needed. There we go. Little thin super glue. And we're going to let that dry for a minute. So talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in just a second. And like magic, my super glue is dry. So there we go. That is a pet peeve of mine, is getting super glue on my fingers. So I just had to stop there. I got too much on there, and I wasn't going to touch it because then I'd have glue all over my fingers for the rest of the week, and I hate that. So there we go. Now, one thing I'm going to do, and this will show to some degree, this back hook, anytime I've got an articulated fly, I take a rubber band, and I save the ones that come on asparagus. Go the other way. Oh yes, only organic asparagus because my wife's a hippie. But at any rate, I'm going to take that, I loop it up under the handle on my vise, and I'll bring it up and just wrap it around that hook bend. And that holds that back there out of the way where it won't poke a big hole in my finger, which I appreciate. So now as we go on, I'm going to do essentially all those same steps again. So I'm going to sort of go quickly through it. I'm going to take another marabou feather, and I'll brush it out a bit. Get a nice even fluff of it, like so. And I'm going to measure it about a shank length long. And I'm going to tie this in at the bend with that same band of thread. And I kind of want that to bleed around the front of that back hook. And I'll lift those butt ends up. Well, you can see my glue still quite wasn't dry there, but I'm going to come up to just behind the cone, and I'll lay that feather down again and tie it off just at the back edge of the cone. Now when I go to trim this off, I'm not going to trim it down flush. I'm actually going to trim it kind of at the outside diameter of the cone. You can see those stubs stick up. Now I can wrap forward over them and sort of jam those into the back of the cone. And that helps to keep the cone centered and fills in some of that void in the back. So then I'll spiral wrap back over that marabou. This is all going to feel very familiar. And we'll find some copper Flashabou. 3 more strands. Wet them down and tie these in the same way. 3 on the far side, pull the near side back, catch it. 3 on the near side. And I'm going to trim those, again, just a little bit longer than that marabou. Like so. Now we're going to select another hackle feather. Same idea. I'm going to strip a little bit here at the bottom to give myself some bare stem. Then I'll create a separation point. Stroke those fibers against the grain, like so. And again, with the inside of the feather toward the hook, I'm going to tie that in right at the bend. Lift that tip up, get that out of there. And we'll come in with another piece of polar chenille. Same gig. I'm going to pull off a length. I'm going to tie it in back here toward the bend. You can see I'm just going from just in front of the hook point to the bend of the hook. I'll bring the thread forward again. And then we're going to trim that down. So just line that up with your scissors and go to town. And again, jagged and ragged is sort of the idea here. Be careful around that feather though, you don't want to cut that off. That would be bad. So like so. So now I'm going to start to wrap this piece of polar chenille just as we did on the back hook. Just one turn in front of the other. And I am trying to butt the wraps of the core next to each other. If you looked real close in here, and I think you guys could probably see it on the camera, you can see the core is actually what's building the body. And we're going to come short of the cone. We want to leave ourselves some room. We've got a couple more steps to go in there. So we're going to tie that off good and tight, 2 or 3 turns. And then here's a pet peeve I keep seeing on videos, and it's right-hand tires, but they come in from this side to trim their material. It's hard to get in close. If you come in from the side of the hook, so not parallel with the hook shank, but perpendicular to the hook shank, you can get your scissors down much closer, make a much cleaner, closer cut. Just get in the habit of cutting from the side. You can get in real close and trim things right off. And you can't do that from the front side because your scissors are blocked by whatever's in front of it. So again, we're going to just kind of check our length if we got anything extra crazy. Did a pretty good job on that one. And then I'm going to fold my feather again. And you don't have to fold this. You know, there's plenty of, you know, I don't want to say sloppy, but plenty of tires that don't bother to fold that hackle. And realistically, on a fly like this, with so much going on, it's going to get kind of buried. But I like to fold it. It just makes that feather wrap more nicely. So I'm going to wrap right up to behind the cone there until I've got bare stem again. And then I'll tie that bare stem off. And same gig as before, I'll fold that back and catch that with a few turns. Then lift it up and trim it out. Now I don't really try to build much of a collar there. We're actually going to put a collar on the fly. I'm going to go in with my brush and pick out the loose fibers. You can see that's actually doing a much better job than my bodkin was. So we've got that shaggy, ragged body. Now we're getting close to the end, so I'm going to take, for the wing on this fly, I'm going to take another olive marabou feather. This fly really only has 3 materials. 3 marabou, hackle, Polish chenille, copper flashabou. Yeah, it's got 3 materials. So it's not terribly material heavy. But I'm going to take another marabou feather, and I'm going to bunch the tip of it up. And I want to measure this one back to the end of this tail, so fairly long. I'm going to tie it in behind the cone. And I want to get a good solid anchor on it. And then just like we did with that tail piece, I'm going to cut this on the outside edge of the cone so that those butt ends sort of sneak down in there. And you can see that cone starting to get a little more centered. And I'll wet that down a bit just so it all stays on the screen. You can kind of see the angle that we're working there. All right, and then finally we're going to put the collar on. And the collar on this fly is going to be, guess what, 1 more saddle feather. And in this case I found a really nice webby one. This one's got a lot of web and fairly long. And I'm going to tie this in by the tip end just like we did the other 2. But I'm going to use this to form the collar up here at the front. But I want to use these longer fibers. I don't want all the shorter, kind of wispier fibers toward the tip. So I've created that separation point. Get them over here on your side. Or created that bare stem at the base, I should say. And then I'm going to create a separation point up here at the front. And you can see how webby that is. That'll just hold its shape right there. I'm going to tie this in right here between the cone and the wing. And I want to anchor that down good and tight there. And then I'll fold that tip. You can see the tip down here. I'm going to fold that tip back and go over it. And that just makes for a much more secure tie down. When I'm going to fold this feather, I'm going to pull on it fairly hard. And if I don't fold that tip back, so you can sometimes pull it out while you're folding the feather. So then I'll cut that excess tip out. And I'll fold these fibers back. And I don't go crazy here. I'm just going to kind of sweep them back. I do want them to stand up a bit. I'll sweep those back out of the way. Now, one thing before let me slide this back out of your way here for the moment. One thing before I wrap that hackle, I'm going to take some thick super glue gel or just thick glue, and I'm going to tilt the cone a bit and squeeze a drop down into that cone. I'll rotate it around a bit. So just a little bit of super glue in the back of that cone. Now, I'm going to pick up my feather. I'm going to begin wrapping him for the collar. So 1 turn, 2 turns, 3, we're going to get about 4 in there. And we'll get to bare stem, and we'll tie that off just behind that cone. And get that down and good and tight, fold that stem back, get a few more turns in there, and then come in and trim that stem out. Now we're going to add just a little bit more Flashabou, and you can put the Flashabou in with the wing, or you could put it in on the outside of the collar. I've been doing them on the outside of the collar. It just starts from the front. So I'm going to fold this in and tie it in at the center of its length there behind the cone. And then fold the other end back, and then just make a few turns to sort of hold those in place. And I like those to be long. It's about the full length of that second tail. And then I'll come in and whip finish. So I'm just going to sneak that whip finish in behind the cone. And I'm pretty tight up there. If you've got any slack, push your cone right up against the front of that hackle collar. That super glue will grab, so everything becomes locked down, and it goes pretty quick. If you put just a little bit of glue in there, it goes pretty quickly. Then we'll just kind of brush things out. See how we're looking? Oh, we're looking pretty good. Yeah, I like it. And that, get back in here. That, my friends, is a rusty trombone. Cool looking fly. That makes me want to go throw this. You can see a lot of volume out of that fly, but pretty slim profile, really. Lots of little flash underneath, so different tone on the bottom than it's got on the top. And obviously, it comes in olive as a rusty trombone. It comes in white or cream as a Goldie. I don't know why you couldn't do it in brown or tan or any variety of other colors, and you probably should. But that's, I went for however long that went. Fairly long involved fly, but really not very hard, and not very long and involved if you're not talking the whole time. So there you go. There's a rusty trombone. I hope you like that. I did. I had a good time. It was nice to spend this time together. Thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven. If you need anything, charlieslybox.com. That's the spot. Hit like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere else. And even better yet, come in the shop and say hi. We'd love to see you. You guys take care. Thanks for watching.